Hello everybody, and welcome to a video where we're going to talk about everything Diablo related that came out of BlizzCon 2016. I'm making this video on the 4th of November. It will go up on the 5th. And that said, I have seen the 20th anniversary panel. I've taken a ton of notes. I just have like this giant crazy piece of paper with these crazy person notes on it. We'll talk about that, but I've also seen the opening ceremony and stuff. That said, there is still one more panel that I have yet to see before making this video. It goes up the same day I'm putting this video up. And there's some more information in there, but it's just really diving into the stuff we already know. And I've gone pretty deep into the assets that Blizzard put up on their official press site. And there's some stuff in there that hadn't been announced, but is in there and I want to talk about. So we'll go over all that. But just generally speaking, we have enough right now to start talking about pretty much everything that was announced. And we will. First off, this BlizzCon was probably the most disappointing for a lot of Diablo fans just because of the hype that surrounded the Diablo news before BlizzCon. And that is partially ourselves and our faults, but at the same time, Blizzard didn't deny any of it. So it kind of makes it a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B as far as whose fault it is that the hype was not necessarily met. That said, it doesn't really matter because it's hype and they weren't obligated to tell us anything. I think that's what I need to land on there. But I assisted in this hype train. On July 30th, I put up a video talking about the potential aspects of Diablo 4 and what I think all of the evidence surrounding this, you know, including the new people hired onto the team and just everything going on the Diablo team and in Blizzard at the moment, and everything that we're seeing in the current content patches on the game and everything, what that all pointed to. And surprisingly, that video is my most disliked video of all of my videos, of all like 3,000 something videos. That's most disliked. That said, it's also one of the most commented on. It was so divisive. A lot of people really liked it. A lot of people enjoyed the ideas of it. Other people hated it. And that is a very good descriptor of Diablo 3 right now. It is a very divisive game. You have the people who played Diablo 3 when it launched, haven't touched it since, remember that game, and hate that game. And I agree with them. That game at launch was terrible, and I was very outspoken about that. Then Reaper of Souls came along, and I really enjoyed what Reaper of Souls did to the game. It made it a lot better. Where the game is right now could arguably be much better. That said, it's still way better than Diablo 3 was at launch, and I still have fun playing it. I play every season. Did I enjoy Season 8 thus far? I finished it. I finished my seasonal journey, but I wasn't ever really hyped to play it. I jumped in every now and again the past couple weeks just to get on and do that stuff, but it's not something that I was necessarily looking forward to, unlike, you know, previous seasons. So I think that is a really good way of describing where Diablo is at the moment. It is divisive. There are people who really like it, there are people who really hate it, and there's a ton of people in the middle who play it every season and just enjoy it for what it is. But with that, we're getting new Diablo 3 content. A lot of people were hyped for potential Diablo 4, Diablo 1 and 2 remasters, and to some degree, some of that information is correct. In fact, in my video where I was talking about the potential of Diablo 4, I mentioned, and this was probably why it was the most hated video I've ever put up, or at least disliked. It still has more likes than it does dislikes by a significant margin, so that's better, but it is still the most disliked video, is I said, I think what they could do, because I am familiar enough with the game design process that I know it takes a long time to make games, and in this case, they would have started recently, which means that they wouldn't have a lot to go off of. My theory behind that video was saying that what they could do is take the content that's already in Diablo 3, put it in a better engine, a new engine that they can then expand upon later, add, you know, more story content and stuff like that in the future. But they can also potentially add the old games into. And to some degree, I was kind of spot on in that prediction. But instead of doing it in a new engine, they're just taking the Diablo 3 engine. And for the 20th anniversary, we are getting a patch. And it's going to come out in January. And you will see this event every January from here on out. It's going to be the anniversary event. But it is essentially Diablo 1 ported into the Diablo 3 engine with some changes. These changes might change when we get closer to launch. We'll talk about that. I'll go into a lot of detail, but that's the first thing we're getting is this yearly anniversary event where you can get some exclusive stuff like portraits and pets and stuff, which is fine, but it is Diablo 1 remade into Diablo 3 in the way that they could do it with that. I'm okay with that because you can't even get Diablo 1 to work on computers nowadays, at least work properly. That's just because it's an old game. That definitely needs to be remastered in some way so people can actually, like GOG would be a really good place to put that, but Blizzard has their own thing, so they would put it on battle.net. But the idea remains the same. They need to remaster that game because it doesn't work on modern machines. So they did it in Diablo 3. We'll get there. We'll talk a lot about that. I have a lot of notes. Again, that anniversary panel gave me a lot of stuff to write down. The second thing, actually I should say the second and third thing, is we are getting more content in Diablo 3, stuff that we could already expect, such as new zones, new sets. That was weirdly confirmed. Quality of life upgrades, a lot of quality of life upgrades. We'll talk about that, including the armory. And then finally, we are getting a new class. We are getting the Necromancer, which a lot of people are either really happy for or really hate because they have announced that it is going to be, at this moment, obviously this could change because it's coming at the second half of 2017, which is quite a long ways, but they're going to have it as kind of a DLC thing. Well, you can purchase it. To me, personally, again, we'll get into this in more detail, I find that okay. I have put in more than a couple thousand hours into Diablo 3, so I'm kind of okay with paying for something because I've put so much time into this game, and the last thing I bought was Reaper of Souls, and that was a couple of years ago. Actually, that was what, 2014? So yeah, it was a couple of years ago. But I'm okay with buying something like that. That comes with a character, and it's actually it's a pack. It comes with a character, a portrait, a pet, a banner, and a couple stash tabs. Again, it's not a big deal to me, but I know a lot of people are kind of upset that they have to pay for that. We'll get into that in great detail. I think what we need to do, now that we kind of know the general scope of what we're getting, I want to start by saying something that I said on the subreddit to people who were getting a little bent out of shape. And so far my response has been pretty universally liked here because I'm trying to keep a level head, especially as someone who wanted a Diablo 4, who wanted a new Diablo game desperately, or at least a remaster of the old 2 games. Even though I still do enjoy my time in Diablo 3, I think what we need to remember is that there is a new Diablo project in the works. They have been hiring for this position for about a year now. It was back in like January, we saw the first position posted, or one of the first position posted for an art director. That guy, by the way, is John Mueller. He is working on this content. He actually worked by helping establish what the Necromancer in Diablo 3 would look like and getting the art together for that. He was on the 20th anniversary panel, but that was one of the first people hired in this process as the art director for this new Diablo project. It's a very specific thing when you look into these job postings, because if it were hiring for the Diablo 3 team, it would say so. In fact, there were job postings for the Diablo 3 team. This was in particular a new unannounced Diablo project. Then we've had several other job listings pop up for this unannounced Diablo project. It's assumed that a lot of the people who are working on Diablo 3 are also working, like who are continuing to work on Diablo 3 are also working on this unannounced Diablo project. So we can pretty much guarantee that they are working on something. When that something will be out, we do not know. Because I'm, again, fairly familiar with the development process, I would expect something late 2017 to be announced. or 2018, early 2018, in that range. Will it be a Diablo 4? Will it be just a RPG, like a tabletop RPG? I don't know. I don't really care. It's just a new thing that they are working on. You can pretty much dismiss a tabletop RPG being one of the things that this team in particular is working on because they have an art director. Yeah, you make art for the books and everything, but they have plenty of artists at Blizzard. They're trying to go for a consecutive look across the game. That's why you hire an art director. This guy is working on this project that they need game developers for, like programmers and stuff with next gen technology from what we saw. So this isn't a tabletop game. They're like literally working on a new game. Again, whatever that means, we don't know, but it's coming. With that out of the way, we can temper our expectations of what we're going to get for the next year. I am a firm believer now, after seeing all this stuff, that this is content to satiate our appetite for a new Diablo game until we get it. You think of it like WoW at the moment. We're in Legion. Legion is really good, continues to be really good, and they're actually promising us content that is coming. Like, this is not Warlords of Draenor where no content came. It was a huge content drought. Instead, they just announced 2 pretty big patches that sandwich the release of Nighthold, which is another raid. So there's a lot of content there. And then, and I'll talk about this, I'll make another video for the WoW stuff, but they also teased the journey to planet where all of the Legion is at. I don't remember, it starts with an A, I don't remember off the top of my head. But they teased that, which is really, really cool. But what the aspect of it is that there's a ton of content in between now and when that, whether it's a new expansion or a new patch is coming out. And it's kind of the same concept here with Diablo. They've given us stuff to look forward to in the future that we're going to be able to consume while we wait for a new Diablo game. So while we're stuck with the game we currently have, though it is being improved upon greatly, and you know, there's other extra content being added, we're in the situation where it's just content that we're going to have to live with for the time being, and there's no way around that. There's nothing that you can change about that. Getting in a huff, getting all aggravated about your expectations not being met, that's not on them necessarily. That's a lot of the community who got way too overhyped for Diablo. That said, it was the 20th anniversary. We could have expected maybe a bit more. So let's start with the first thing. Let's start with this anniversary update, which is going on the PTR next week. We will make videos of it. I will go really in depth with it when it comes out because I'm hyped for it. I think it's a really cool thing. I remember playing Diablo 1 when my dad first got it, and then he ended up getting Diablo 2. Funny story, I ended up beating that game for him because he couldn't beat Diablo. And so I took control over his character and beat Diablo for him. Long story, it was really my first foray into Diablo. And I think for a lot of people, Diablo 1 wasn't something they touched. They came in at Diablo 2, but I did manage to actually play Diablo 1. I do remember that experience fondly. So to go back into that world recreated in the Diablo 3 engine, I think that's fun for me. I'm looking forward to it. But again, this is going on the PTR next week, and it will be live in January, and it will come back once a year. So you'll always have this year to do this event. Now, from the anniversary panel, they pretty much told us that they were originally only going to add the music at first. You know, the Tristram theme, the guitar theme. And that was just going to play while you played the normal game, and then that was kind of cool. But they said that wasn't enough, so they were going to redo the UI. So they did a retro UI that looks like the Diablo 1 stuff. And then eventually they went in and added the entirety of the Diablo 1 experience, going in and killing the Butcher all the way down to Diablo. And they even added a new filter on the game. This is a graphical filter. It pixelates everything. And I'll put the screenshots there. It's weird to get used to, but when you look at the old Diablo 1 screenshots, you're like, actually, that's not half bad. That's a better looking version of that by a significant margin. But at the same time, it's it feels like Diablo 1. It feels like you're going back into something old. They also removed some of the running animations. So it looks more like the old Diablo because you only have 8 axes of running. When you move, unlike in Diablo 3 where you could just hold your cursor and spin it around and you do 360s, this is more like your character will only run in 8 directions because that was the animation limits that they had back when Diablo first came out. And when Diablo first came out, it was actually pretty advanced for its time. So this kind of stuff that we're seeing, while it looks really old to us, it is very retro in the way that that stuff was pretty advanced back then. So we're going to get that. When you complete it, from my understanding, you will get 2 new portraits, which kind of match the UI stuff. Really cool portraits. For Diablo 3, you can use those on any of your characters. Any of your characters can go and do this, including the following year, so 2018, because 2017 will start with this. We won't get the Necromancer until mid-2017 to the second half of 2017. Then the beginning of 2018, if you really wanted to go do it on a Necromancer, you can also do that. But there's going to be a new banner and sigil. There's a new pet, which is a butcher pet. It's actually really cute. It's a little baby butcher. There's also something that they're adding with this, which I find fascinating because this gives a lot of credence to new content coming out. We'll talk about that when we get into that part. But they're adding a new legendary gem that goes in your helmet. And it's going to also have a transmog with this gem in particular, which is the Diablo Soulstone, just like right in your forehead. And I like that. It fits the Diablo 1 theme. But it also is adding new content. We're going to get legendary gems for helm slots. I'll put the legendary gem effect up on the screen. It's really cool, but it is different. And I think I like that. Then once you finish it, you'll get the old cinematic that played, when you beat the old Diablo 1. There's a couple other things in there that you'll be able to get for transmogs. The old Wirt's leg, the wooden one, which I find funny because they have the bone one in the game already. You get the classic Butcher's Cleaver, which looks a lot like the Butcher's Cleaver from Heroes of the Storm. It looks cool. They've updated the Butcher art to be more retro for this event. And in fact, they updated all of the character arts to be more retro, except for, certain characters like Lazarus they had to create because Lazarus doesn't exist in Diablo 3 as it is right now. And all of this is coinciding, from what we can tell, with patch 2.4.3, which is going to add new items and a couple other things. So this entire anniversary update is one thing. Let's box that away. We talked about that. It's cool. It's fun. It's unique. It's different. And to some degree, it's not what people were expecting. We did kind of hint on that it's something that they could have done when we were discussing this in the months leading up to BlizzCon. But it's a step in the right direction as far as these remasters are concerned. Is it perfect? No. But will it be a cool nostalgic experience for people who play Diablo 1? Yes. So now let's move on to patch 2.4.3. This is going to add those new items, and from what we can tell from what they said at the anniversary panel, this is going to be your typical update that they've done, like think season 4, 5, and 6, where they went back and redid some of the set bonuses, like updating invokers, for example, or just adding new sets like the Seeker of the Light set for Crusader. So by adding new stuff into the game, it adds additional options for each class. Maybe they'll add a set for each class, probably not all in one season, probably more like 2 sets and then another 2 sets. Pretty much expect what they did on the earlier seasons where they were adjusting and redoing sets and adding new sets, because that's essentially what their plan is to do here, is to add more stuff into the game. That said, most of that panel that's happening the day that I put this video up will be deep diving into more of that stuff. We're not gonna get into it because it's stuff that is expected of the team at the moment, because it's stuff that they've been doing. When those sets come out and we get a chance to test them, I'll make a video. You know how it is. But what I want to talk about is the other stuff coming with this patch, including the addition of seasons on consoles. Not a lot of people that watch this channel probably play on consoles. There are certainly people who watch this channel that do play on console, but not a lot of people do. A lot of people play on PC, despite the fact that there is a significant following of people who play Diablo on console. And that, to me, is really strange, but at the same time, I understand it. And with that being said, they're adding seasons to consoles starting in Season 10, and I think that's a really big step in the right direction. I actually had friends that would play on console and would always ask me about builds that I was using, and, you know, this was like back with Season 6, and I'm telling them about like the new Demon Hunter builds and stuff, and they just did not understand. They're like, we don't have those items. What are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, you could, it's just, you know, go over to Kadala and get it off of the gems and stuff. And they're like, that we've tried. We've spent thousands and thousands of shards. It does not come from Kadala. I'm like, are you sure you're on Torment? And, you know, it's one of those situations where I didn't realize that the patches on console were so far behind and were not being updated. Well, now they're getting seasons. How that will work, I don't know. Is the leaderboard going to be super stable? Because the consoles are pretty notorious right now for a huge amount of hacking and exploiting. I don't know how that leaderboard is going to work and if it will ever be legit, but at the same time, it's cool that they're getting the content, right? And I think that's a big thing here. But on top of that, we're also getting the quality of life stuff, like the armory. Now, the armory is something where you have 5 loadouts that you can choose from. You can save these loadouts. So say you're playing Monk in Season 8 and the Generator Monk, the ZDPS Monk, so the Support Monk, and Juliana's are all sets that you want to use, sets that you're going to interchange, and even LTK. So you're going to do the speedrun Lashing Tail Kick build. Well, to switch those stuff out is actually a time-consuming process, and it's really annoying and highly inconvenient. So they're adding the feature that we've been asking for pretty much years, which are these sets. So you can put together and save a set into the armory, and then just by pushing a button, by going back to town, going near your stash where the armory is, and pushing a button which says equip, it'll change out all of the skills, all of the passives, all of the skill runes, all of the gear, and all of the gems. So if you saved your set with, you know, a ton of royal emeralds in your chest piece and your, you know, your pants and everything, your weapons, pretty much the last time you did it. But what ends up happening is that diamond, you hadn't quite upgraded, and it's not, you know, a Marquise. It's just, it's a pretty crappy diamond in your helm. When you upgrade that outside of that set, and now you have that gem available, it'll automatically switch that gem out when you switch to that set. So this also happens with legendary gems. Say you had a level 45 Bane of the Trapped when you saved the set initially. But since then, you have leveled that gem up to level 70. So when you switch back to that set, it will switch out that 45 that should be there for the highest level gem that's available for that gem. So it'll switch it to your highest level Bane of the Trapped, which in this scenario would be your 70. So it works out really well the way it does that. It doesn't switch out Paragon points because just of the way that Paragon points work, how you're always getting them. It would be weird to constantly redistribute and resave the armory. So your Paragon points won't switch, but everybody knows you come to a certain point when you hit 800 during a season that you just... It's all on the main stat really anyways after that, so it doesn't really matter. That said, it's not that big of a deal that it doesn't switch out. And then I think the biggest thing here is that they're removing the penalty to unsocketing gems from your gear. So that you're not having to pay gold to do that anymore. They don't want to discourage you for setting up these different sets on the armory. They want to give you any encouragement you can just to go crazy and set up all the sets. And I like that a lot, but that's all coming with the 2.4.3. And then finally, one thing I noticed in the screenshots here, and I'll put it up, is they have this whole inventory system where you can manage your crafting materials without having them in your inventory or having them in your stash. They are stored elsewhere. They're stored in the ether, just like your gold, where you don't have to worry about it being in your stash anymore. From what I can tell with this, obviously we'll learn more about that panel That's later today. But from everything we can tell, your crafting mats are now stored elsewhere, which will increase the amount of storage space a lot of people have, because I have an entire stash tab dedicated to crafting materials. So to have all that, all the bounty materials and everything put into just the ether and the cloud, you might say, and be able to use those regardless of where they're at. Awesome. I love that. Now, finally, let's talk about the Necromancer, the pack, and what all of that means. First, let's talk about the Necromancer. The Necromancer is a really cool character class from the previous Diablo. The thing that we really need to have stand out here is that this is the Necromancer from Diablo 2 aesthetically. They did a really good job of kind of mimicking the original set, you know, like the skull on the side and everything. It looks cool because it looks like the OG Necromancer, just updated into the Diablo 3 engine. They made him more like glam, you know? He's kind of like David Bowie meets, I don't know, some crazy rocker. But it's rad. I like the look of him. I like his aesthetic because he's a little bit more metal than the Witch Doctor, which is going to be really important because you want to distinguish those two classes as much as you possibly can, because the Witch Doctor was pretty much the analog to the Necromancer to begin with. Now, the Witch Doctor, as they said during the anniversary panel, is a little bit more fun, being able to turn into a chicken every 5 seconds. There's a little bit of comedy that comes with the Witch Doctor, whereas the Necromancer is going to be more focused on being a commander of the army of the dead, up to the point where all of the pets, so you can summon your skeletons and everything, or even the golems. They showed the golems again, which is cool because those were in Diablo 2. The one they showed in particular was the blood golem. It looked awesome. But every pet for the Necromancer has an active and a passive effect, just like a mantra does for a monk. So it'll have a passive effect in that it attacks and it does certain things with each rune. But when you activate it, you can tell the minions to go and attack. Now, this is something that Witch Doctors are now super salty about because they've been wanting this for years, ever since the Witch Doctor was ever playable, because your pets are so stupid as the Witch Doctor. But this is more because you are a Necromancer, you are the one commanding these pets. They're not just like a crazy zombie dog you summoned. They are undead skeletons that are your pretty much your soldiers that will follow everything that you say. You can then tell them to attack using your activated ability. You can have them switch targets, basically, which is crazy powerful. I think it's going to be pretty hard to balance that, but I think they're going to do a very good job of just making it feel right. If it feels fun to play, that's all that really matters to me. And then on top of that, they're going off of certain like sets that we've seen. They showed off some concept art from some sets. So kind of the classic set from Diablo 2, more of a sacrifice and aristocratic set. And then, you know, ones that are more themed around blood and reanimation and bone. So the sets that we're getting with the Necromancer feel like Necromancer sets because they are themed around the Necromancer. On top of that, the Necromancer itself has 2 resources. The first is Essence, which works, from what I can tell, it's not like mana at all. It's more like Spirit, in the fact that you generate it. From what they showed, there is no passive generation. So I guess actually more like Rage would be a better example. But the second the second resource are corpses. So you can use corpses for various things, obviously summoning skeletons and stuff like that, but corpse explosion is a thing that you can do. Think explosive palm, but the thing is already dead and on the ground. You can lure things into a huge bunch of corpses. Imagine like Greater Rift 80 or 90 speed runs where you just kill a ton of stuff and now there's tons of corpses everywhere. You can use those corpses then to kill more stuff that come into the place. It's a cool idea. I really like it. They're adding curses, so you can throw down a curse on the ground, kind of like, in a way, kind of like an inner sanctuary, but more so like the Demon Hunter traps, I think is probably the best analog there for Diablo 3, where they will run into it and get cursed, so slowed and like damage reduction, stuff like that. I'm sure the various Runes will change that up quite a bit. Then you can siphon blood. So siphon blood is something that you can do to gain essence back, which will allow you to cast more stuff, obviously. And siphon blood also steals life too. But you have things that you can use like Blood Rush, which is teleport or dashing strike. It's kind of your movement ability, but everything's themed around this stuff. I think the coolest thing they showed was the Army of the Dead, which is basically, what's the best analog for the Witch Doctor? Probably, actually, you know what? Pile On is probably a good example, or Zombie Charger with the Pile On rune, where it's basically something that hits an area. Let's just say Zombie Charger in general. It's something that hits an area, except in a circular pattern for the rune they showed, where it's just over 100 skeletons popping out of the ground and crashing into the middle, and it does a ton of damage according to that little video they showed. But it is a cool animation, and I think the most important thing to pull out of this is that the Necromancer does look and feel different than the Witch Doctor. And I think there's going to be people who still play the Witch Doctor, still enjoy the Witch Doctor. But I think there's going to be also plenty of people who jump on the Necromancer and then that's their new jam. They were Witch Doctor players because they liked the Necromancer in Diablo 2. And now the Necromancer is their jam. And I think that's totally fine because I think the Necromancer may see some really interesting sets. They are going to do set bonuses for the Necromancer. They confirmed that. And I think the Necromancer is going to be something that changes up the meta, at least in the slightest ways, which could only be good for the game, especially when they're adding new sets to the rest of the classes and updating old sets and, you know, builds and all that. Finally, the thing I wanted to touch on here before we pretty much wrap this video up is the idea that this Necromancer is coming out in essentially a DLC pack. There are a few other things that you could expect from stuff like this. Maybe a druid, maybe an assassin, although an assassin is basically a monk, but you can argue that Witch Doctor was basically a necromancer. Maybe an Amazon, that would be kind of cool. You know, a different version of the Demon Hunter. I think there's plenty of classes that you can do that were existing, but I think the biggest draw here for me is if they're going to do DLC packs like this, why not make an entirely new class? Why not make like a bard? Like, how cool would that be? Music is such a big part of Diablo 3. I think a bard would be awesome. And maybe even as a little Easter egg, be able to play that Tristram theme and stuff like that. I think bard was a class that surprised a lot of people in the Dragon Age Inquisition multiplayer because it utilized the idea of music in an interesting way in that. And if you ever played it, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, essentially, you know, playing certain tunes would have certain effects on your people around you. I think they could get away with doing a really awesome bard class for Diablo and literally melt people's faces off with music. I think that sounds awesome. I want that. Now that I think about it, which essentially I literally just made up, I want that. I want that so bad. I would play the heck out of that class. But these packs, these DLC packs, have the option of doing things like that, where the game before was a little limited. Now, you might ask, well, then why do we need to pay for it? And I will retort with, we don't know how much it's going to cost. What if it's $5? Then it's absolutely worth it. But even if that's still too steep of a price, for some people, it may very well be. I think when you put into perspective that Blizzard has been supporting Diablo 3 with several patches before Reaper of Souls ever came out, and then with Reaper of Souls, they've literally updated the game pretty consistently. I say consistently, but that's in relative terms compared to some of the other games in the industry. I'm not talking about action RPGs. I'm just talking about games in general that are released and then abandoned, where Blizzard have a certain stamp of quality that they've tried to go for, where, you know, when you buy a Blizzard game, you're going to get a long tail on the game. You're going to get updates to the game. The game is going to be changed over the course of time, and there's always going to be some reason for you to go back to the game eventually. And Blizzard want to keep that up. But at the same time, Blizzard's also working on a new project. I mean, they've reduced the price of Diablo. You can get Diablo with the expansion and all that for fairly cheap now. It's the standard price of the game. It's a little battle chest. which tells me that they want to squeeze the last little bit of money out of Diablo 3 that they can, and that includes the DLC packs. Is that a bad thing? No, they are a business. They need to make money. That is my argument there. That's final. Like, you can't argue against that. They are a business. They need to make money. They have not been unfair and nickel and diming us since Reaper of Souls launched. In fact, they've been very fair, giving us tons of free content, and I have gotten 1,000+ hours out of the game with only paying $60. And I think that is such a huge deal that people don't quite understand, because people are buying, you know, Battlefront and Battlefield 1 and stuff, and you literally are being nickeled and dimed all the way down to the smallest little piece of DLC that you're getting on a season pass, where Blizzard has been releasing that content for free for years. And now they want to give you one little cool thing that is worth the money, which is a new class to the game. Is that pay to win? No, because the other classes are still viable. So they want to give you this really cool thing that is kind of nostalgic and will help fund the next Diablo project. Again, we know they're working on one. I don't think that's unfair for them to ask $5 to $20. Is it going to be $30? Probably not. I would expect $5 to $25. I think that's going to be the range that we see on this DLCs. I don't want to call it DLC. It's more like a character pack. I think that's a better way to put it, where you get a new character class. And considering the time it takes to make a character class, they've started recently on the Necromancer, which is why it's not releasing until next year. I would say that that's totally worth it. If you add up the salaries of all the people working on that class, they're not going to make their money back on that, but they will keep people playing, you know, Diablo 3. And it helps, you know, soften the blow for working on a new project that won't be out for probably several years. So with that in mind, I think that the character packs are completely fine. I don't think people should have an issue with that. And if you do have an issue with it, by all means, express it in the comments. I want to know why. I think it's unfair to demand Blizzard give it for free, considering they've been updating the game for free for years now. And it's unfair of us to demand that the character pack be free. It's such a big thing, adding a new class with new sets and new animations. Like, this is a huge deal in game design to do something this big. And they're doing it not as an expansion, not as a $60 ordeal that we can tell is going to be a fairly cheap thing that's just a cool little add-on to the game. Anyways, I think I've drone on long enough about that. There was one last thing that they're adding to the game with 2.4.3 or thereafter, which are challenge rifts. Don't know what those are, but they've talked about them being a thing. And just generally new zones. The art director, John Mueller's been working on them. We'll see what those are like, if they have any story content. But I think from here on out, all the new zones and stuff that we're going to see are going to be building to a new story, a new Diablo game, and are going to launch into whatever that is. So keeping an eye on what happens in those zones is probably going to be a pretty big deal if you want any further clues on what a new Diablo game is. Maybe I'll do another video based on what they announce or show at this other panel. It's very unlikely though, but there will be more videos going up from the PTR this next week. And then finally, I will likely be doing a WoW video, possibly a HOTS and Overwatch video of just kind of a summary of everything that's being added and what we can look forward to later this year, early next year. But with that being said, we shall see you guys next time.